Bored of Java coding?
No, I came here to see the complete code on how to build a calculator using Java. The code was written in Eclipse. I will simply download the code and play around with it.
What is Eclipse?
It is a platform on which you can do Java coding very easily. You can play, edit and fix your code very easily in this environment. Watch this video to see how. Download the code.
Hello, welcome to this tutorial. Today we'll be making a simple calculator. As you can see, we can write some numbers for an example and then divide them. 74 divided by 5. We can also multiply these numbers by any other number as well. Next, we can delete some characters or even the whole thing, just like here. Before we start, we first need to install the IDE, or the Integrated Development Environment. We, for an example, are using Eclipse. On Google, let's go to the Eclipse website. Now we have the installer. Make sure you download the correct bit version, if you're using 32-bit Windows or 64-bit Windows. Click on Download. Once it is finished downloading, simply click the file. Now click on Run. Here, select Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Choose the installation folder, and then we'll simply install it. Once the installation is completed, you can launch Eclipse. Once it asks you for the workstation or the workspace, simply click Launch. Now, full screen it. Now that we have everything set up, let's first create our project. Close this tab. Then click on File, New, Java Project. Then we're just going to type a name, like Calculator Project. Just click on Finish. Now we can see that our project is added in the Package Explorer. Clicking the down arrow shows the source file. We'll be using Window Builder, which makes the project easier to manage. It is a plugin, so we have to first install it. To do so, click on Help, go to Install New Software, paste in the link. Now check the Window Builder, click on Next, and wait for it to install. Now we see a list of things that we are about to install. So click on Next, accept the terms of the license agreement, and click on Finish. Now we need to restart Eclipse for it to take effect. Now that Eclipse is restarted, we can start working. First, right-click on the project. Go to New, Other, and down here now you'll be able to see Window Builder. Click on the down arrow. Move down to Swing Designer, on the down arrow again, and select Application Window. Next, now we should type in a name. Let's just call it Calculator, and click on Finish. This will give us some codes. It doesn't matter what this is, I won't be explaining what this does. What we are interested in is in the Design tab, located next to the Source tab. Clicking on the Design tab, we can now see our application. Running this code now will simply give us a blank window, as you can see here. You can't do much with the window. You can simply resize it, minimize it, and in the end, close it. First we need to change the shape of the application. Click on the window in the Design panel, and then reshape it as you like. Once you're happy with the design, we need to do a few more things. First, in the Layouts section, you will find Absolute Layout. Just click on it, and then click on the panel. What this does is allows us to make our own design and makes sure that the buttons and everything we put on the calculator stay where we put them. Now, we firstly need a text field. We're going to put it in the middle, and this will act as our display. We can make it wider and taller. Let's firstly add one button. Delete the text inside, position the button where you want it to be, and then change the shape. Also, on the left, you can see a properties panel. This might look complicated, but it really isn't. These two-digit numbers represent how tall and how wide the button is. So we can change those to 50 and 50. Now, we need to change the variable property as well. We need a way to know which button is which digit. So we're simply going to type 7 here, since this will be the 7th button. Now, when you go down to text, you can type in what you want to see on the button. We're just going to type 7. If you want to change the font and make it bigger, on the Properties panel, find the Fonts tab, click on the 3 dots. You can change the font, style, and the size. I'm just gonna increase the size for the time being. Let's add another button. Adding a new button, delete the text inside, make it 50 wide and 50 high. Put it a bit closer. Change the variable to button 8, and in the text, change it also to 8. Now, when we go back to the source, we will see new code added. These are the important things. These are the 2 buttons we added previously. If you don't want to put them manually in the design, we can edit the source code to add more buttons. Simply copy these 2, hit Ctrl+C to copy them, go into the new lines, and simply paste them. Now, this makes an error, because you can't have duplicate values. We already have a button 7, so we have to change this into button 9. Also, this here is the text that gets shown on the digits, so let's change that to 9 as well. We have to change this into a 9 as well, this to a 9 as well, and in the end, this to a 9 as well. We'll be doing a similar thing to button 8, which is now a button plus. We will add a symbol here, and we will simply add plus. Now, one more thing we have to do is to change their location. In here, the first 2 numbers represent the location. The location of the first button is 1077, and the second button is 7077. We can notice that by changing the X value by 60, we move the button to the right. So we will do the same for the next one. 70 plus 60 is 130. 130 plus 60 is 190. Now, when we go back to the design panel, we can see that these buttons are added. We can also see that our application window is a bit small, so we're simply going to extend it. Once you're happy with how this looks, we can create the next row. The next row will simply be made like the first one. First, click on Enter, and type in 2 forward slashes. Comments are used to simply, well, comment the code. They won't do anything, and they won't change anything in the application. Now, when we want to make the second row, we'll simply copy these 4 buttons here. Now, we also need to change the names because they're again duplicates, and we also need to change their location. Let's also change the other values needed. Now, what we need to do is make them in the second row. We will offset them the same value by 60 pixels, like we did here. We'll be doing it on the Y value to make them go down. Now, when we go back to the design panel, we can see that there's another row here. Continue doing this until you have finished the graphical interface. To get the backspace symbol, if you go to the source file, in the name type in /U2190. Now, when we start the calculator and try to type something in, you can see that nothing happens. This is because we simply added the buttons and not the logic that prints the number in the display. In Java and in other programming languages, action listeners simply listen if there is a change. In our case, when we click a button, like 0 or 1, we want it to print out on the display. To add an action listener to a button, right-click it, go down to Add Event Handler, Action, and then Action Performed. It'll take us to the code, and you can see that these 4 lines are added. It adds the action listener to the button, and it makes a method called Action Performed. What happens between these 2 curly braces here is what will happen when we click the button. Now, we want to print out on the display the clicked value. To do this, we must first get the text of the digit. In Java, string represents text. We're going to make a string called number, and then it will equal to the text field button 0.getText. What this line does is makes a string, which is text, calls it a number so that we can use it later. Now to explain this, the text field is our display. GetText method simply gets the text which is in the display and adds the text from the button. So this number should be the same text from the button added to the text in the display. Now to print out this number in the display, we have to set the text in it. To do so, we type in. Don't forget to put the semicolon on the end of each line. What this does is sets the text, which is this number, onto the display. Now when we run our calculator, click on OK. If we click 0, it gets printed out on the display. I want the digits to be printed on the right hand side instead of the left hand side. So, go to the Properties panel, and on Horizontal Alignment, select Right. We can see that the font is bigger and it gets printed on the right hand side. Now, this is only for the button 0. If you try to click any other button, nothing will happen. So we have to write the same code for every other button as well. To add the action listener to button 1, we will simply copy and paste the code we used before, and then change the button 0 to button 1. Running the calculator now will allow us to write both 1s and 0s, but not the other buttons. We will do this for the rest of the buttons, simply changing the name of the button. So now, when we run the calculator, you can see we can write any number we want. Now, let's start adding functionality to these buttons as well. First, let's go to the clear. In the design, double-click the clear button. That will make an action performed method on it as well. Now, since clear should simply delete everything from the text, we will type text field dot set text, and then we'll type in null. In Java, null is simply nothing. So when we set the text to null, it'll get cleared. Running the calculator now will allow us to write a number, and then clicking on C, it gets deleted. Now let's start adding functionality to the other buttons as well. Let's start with the backspace. Double-clicking it, or right-clicking and adding event handler, will prompt us with this. We will write a bit more code here than we did before, so pay attention. So if I make an if statement like this, it will simply check if what in these parentheses is true. If it is, it will run all the code between these two curly braces. Now, we can't delete a digit from the display if there are no digits. So first we need to check if there's more than 0 digits. We type in. What this does is it gets the text from the display. The .length method simply returns the number of digits on the screen, and this operator checks if it's more than 0. We will be using a string builder, which is similar to a string, but sometimes it's easier to manage. We will simply call it strb for convenience, and it equals a new string builder. And in these parentheses, we enter the value we wanted to have. In our case, it's text field dot get text. Now, we type in strb, which is the name of our string builder, dot delete char at. Now we'll type text field dot get text dot length -1. This method deletes the character at a certain position. In our case, it will delete a character, which is this number. This number is actually the length of the text field, -1. That way, we find the index of the last character. Now, up here, we'll make a string variable and name it Backspace. Here, we will be using that backspace. Now, we will be using that backspace. This backspace equals to strb.toString. And then, we get the text field and set the text to the backspace character. So now, when we run the code, type something in, we click on backspace, it deletes the last character. This button should simply invert the number. If it's 5, clicking this button will make it -5. If it's -5, clicking this button will make it +5. We will be using a double. Just type in double. Then we'll write the name of our double, which is number. And it equals to double.parse double, and then text field dot get text. What this does is parses a double, which means converts a string to a double, and we simply get the text from the display. Now, we want to invert this number we just got. To do so, we simply type in number equals minus number. And then, we set that number to the display. What this does is gets the value of the number, which is any number we made, and then puts it into a string. And type in something. Clicking on plus or minus will negate it. Let's continue adding the functionality. We first have to declare some variables. Going back to the top of the code, we can see some variables declared here. Going a bit down, we'll make our own variables as well. We'll make a double first num, we'll make a double second num, double result, and we'll make two strings. One will be a string operation, and the other one will be string answer. Let's start with the plus sign. What we're going to do here is parse the display to get the number from the display and put it into the double. So we type in, we're going to set the text field, or the display, to nothing. Now, we type in operation equals plus. When we click the plus button, we now know that the operation is plus, and we can use this in the end to determine which button was pressed. Copy the code we use here and into the minus. we will simply change this to minus as well. Now, to finish this up, everything here has its own function, excluding the equals button. We'll type in string answer. Just bear with me, we'll first write this and then I'll explain it. This might be confusing for you. First, we have a string called answer. This doesn't play much role now, however, in the end, we have to have a string in order to print it out on the display. We get the second number, which is the current number inputted in the calculator. We simply parse the double and get the text from the field and assign it to the number. Now we make an if statement. We now know that this operation depends on which button we clicked. For an example, if we want to divide, the operation is slash. If the operation equals plus, which means that we clicked the plus button, the result simply adds the two numbers and then assigns an answer. This answer uses string.format. To format this string, we type in %.2f. This percentage here means there should be any number there, and then .2f means that we'll have two zeros or two precise numbers afterwards, also known as floating point numbers. And we also need an integer or a number, in our case a double, which goes into the format as well, which is our result. This basically means that use this result and format it like this. And then in the display we set the text as answer. So 78 plus 5, the answer should be 83. And it is. Now we'll make one for minus. We type in else if, so if the operation is not plus, check if the operation is something else. In our case, operation.equals minus. If it equals minus, do the thing in these two brackets. We can now see that we can also subtract numbers. So 10 minus 5 equals 5. If we run the calculator and type in 74 divided by 15, we get 4.93. We can negate it or put it back into plus. We can then multiply this, for an example, by 8, delete these two characters, multiply this again with 94, and then clear it all. We can